All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We are waiting for one guest host to join us tonight. They are logging on momentarily. So thank you so much for joining. My name is Kelly Rodriguez Curry, and I am the Director of Graduate Studies here at Seattle University School of Law. So I oversee the Master of Legal Studies. And joining us right now is Frank DiMarino, and we'll have an opportunity to have him introduce himself in just a moment. And we'll have another guest joining us in a minute also. We'll give folks a minute or two to log in here. I'm a rather punctual person, so I sometimes jump the gun a little bit early. That was a problem when I was a competitive swimmer also. I got disqualified many, many times. Oh, hello. Yes, Anne, I see you. Go ahead. Go ahead. I've given you permission to speak.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. I don't see a way to turn on my video
Oh,
with
okay,
this
yes.
link.
I think I can do this for you. Hang on. We had to make
perfect.
I had to make Professor DiMarino a co-host, and it's not letting me make you a co-host, and it's not letting me like turn on your video for you, which is unfortunate.
That is okay. I'm fine to just talk without showing my face.
No, but that's so sad. I wanted to be able to see you. Okay, well, I'll try and figure that out as we go through this. So
Sure.
hang in there with me.
Sure, no
I
problem.
feel like every webinar is just an adventure in Zoom, right? We're 2 years into this Zoom thing and still figuring it out every day. So thanks for joining us. I think it's actually, well, we'll figure it out. Okay. So let's see. Oh, wow. We're getting ahead of ourselves. I have included, for those of you all attending, I've included my contact information here. I've included it on the last slide also, so don't feel like you need to scramble to write it down. But feel free to send me an email or connect with me via phone if you have any questions that come up throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so just a quick overview of where we're headed this evening. Tonight, we're going to discuss the idea of a capstone project. It's something that is super foundational in the MLS program here at Seattle U. So we'll go over some quick introductions and highlight the capstone project, talk about what it is and everything. And then we will highlight some of the components of the MLS in compliance and risk management more generally here at Seattle U, and end with some questions and answers. Happy to answer whatever we can. At this point, I am pretty well versed in most of the program. So, and I've been here at Seattle U for many years, so I've got quite a few answers up my sleeve. So we'll do the best we can. And if Anne, if you could introduce yourself, please feel free to expand on what I've included here. Maybe kind of where you started in before you entered the program and where you are now and everything in between.
Sure. I like to say I started in cybersecurity when it was just called the internet. And I've been working in IT for quite a bit. And then I found myself working in quality management and what I like to call quality and risk management, and for a cybersecurity company. And while there, I just knew I needed to get a little bit of street cred, and decided to look how I could further my career. And I spoke to Linda and said, you know, what do you think Seattle U can do for me, and what can I bring to Seattle U? And I applied, and throughout the time here, I've been promoted to the Senior Director of Corporate Compliance at Coalfire, which is a cybersecurity services firm. And I also serve as adjunct faculty here in the summer here at Seattle U. So that kind of brings us up to date, I think.
Yeah, we're super excited. You've brought in so much to the program, and super excited to have you on faculty.
Thank you.
Yeah, Professor DiMarino, if you could introduce yourself and, oh man, you wear so many hats here, so we're happy to have you on board.
And I'm so delighted to co-present with Ann this evening and also with you, Kelly. And Ann, I've got to say just one other thing. You were also awarded the Student Excellence in Compliance with a Conscience Award. So that goes to one student each year. And we were so delighted that you had earned that award. It was well earned. So I've been with Seattle University now in the compliance program for 3 years, and I've been delighted to teach a number of courses, the Introduction to American Legal Systems. And so I see the students throughout the program, and at the very end, I see them for the Capstone course. I was previously a federal prosecutor for 27 years, working as an assistant United States attorney in the Southern districts of Florida and Georgia. And also I was a previous judge advocate general officer too in the United States Army. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So I'll turn it back over to you, Kelly.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it. It's always alarming to me to hear your, even just the summary of your resume. I'm always very humbled. So thank you so much. So starting us off, I would love to have you maybe introduce to us, Frank, what on earth is a capstone to begin with?
Yes, so the capstone course is really a culminating experience for students at the end of their program. So it gives them an opportunity to really reflect on what they have learned, integrate that knowledge, and then demonstrate that knowledge in a capstone project. And so, many universities, they think, okay, a capstone project is going to be a written paper. Well, we go beyond that. I think that's really what differentiates our MLS program in compliance and risk management from other programs. Because one of the things that the capstone experience provides is a student to really follow their passion, where they would like to learn more, where they have excelled in their learning, and then to apply that in a project. And the project can be a number of things. On this slide, for instance, it could be a podcast. It could be building a website, and we'll talk about that more. It could be building, for instance, an Excel spreadsheet that becomes a capstone or a compliance tool so that a startup industry or a startup company could use it then to determine, okay, what are these things that I need to comply with in order to be abiding by the laws and regulations that affect my particular startup. And so it could be, for instance, a policy proposal. Our students are concerned about where the trends are in compliance and risk management and how the government is beginning to regulate this area more. And so the policy proposal could be simply what a corporation should follow in order to abide by regulations. In addition to a compliance policy proposal, it could be, for instance, a business plan or a scholarly paper or an interoffice memo. So again, what the project is really based upon what the student's initiative might be. And so we try to really foster that initiative so that they can come up with an innovative project that culminates their learning experience throughout the program.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's worth noting too that all of these ideas, both the ones here and the ones that Professor DiMarino highlighted, are actual capstone projects that our students have done. So perhaps, I don't know, maybe Anne, do you want to take this one and explain kind of where the capstone project fits in relation to the other courses that our students take?
Sure. I actually believe that your capstone sort of starts at the beginning of your study. You don't realize that it has until you get much further along. And what you realize is you've been honing your expertise along the way. and finding out where your particular interests lie, where compliance and risk management sort of intersects with your own personal preferences. And so for me, the foundational courses, because I had never attended law school before, my bachelor's degree was in English. So I just told people I can read in English real good. That's about, that was the extent of my knowledge before I joined this program. And I found myself really loving to learn about our legal system, and the professors here, especially early on with writing, how to really look at objective legal writing, and then how to really research what it is that you're interested in whatever topic you're discussing that particular week. All of that kind of led itself to, at the end, when you got to the capstone, for me, at least when I got to the capstone, I really found that I had been sort of shepherding my way with the help of Frank and Kelly. You were one of my professors as well at the time. And every one of the professors had kind of helped steer you in a direction to say, this is, at the end, you're going to have this ultimate project. I like the capstone as an end goal rather than an exam, because it really is a practical application of the knowledge that you've gained. And also it really is a place where you can demonstrate both what you've learned about the law and how to apply the law, but also apply it to your particular interests or your area of concern. And for me, since I was already working in compliance and risk management in cybersecurity, and I've worked on many of the large data breaches that you can think of in recent history, a lot of the practical things weren't new to me, but how the law was applied was very new to me. And so leading up to that capstone at the end was really just, it's that icing on the cake. It is the cap to everything that you're doing with the program.
We did actually have a question that I think could be answered pretty well right here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One of the guests asked, since the program is fully online, how would a student go about seeking writing help without being able to go on campus? And I think that since you were talking about the just the writing courses and whatnot, how accessible were the professors to you online?
Well, it took me a while, but I'm learning to call Frank Frank by his first name, so that should tell you something. I started off very much saying Professor DiMarino and Professor Rodriguez Curry, and that became a mouthful after a while. And so
Lots of names.
Yes, we just learned to start calling each other, because we were all working together in a cohort. I was part of the first cohort in this program. And so we had many amazing people from across various industries. And so every single one of the professors were accessible even after you exited the course. There was a writing professor, Alumna. I can't even pronounce her last name. I don't even remember her last name, but just a really great writing professor in the very beginning, and helped me. For those of my friends who know me, they were not surprised that in writing, it was very hard for me to write objectively. It was actually one of the worst grades I had in the entire, my entire time at Seattle U was in writing, and I'm a writer. So I was really surprised by that. But my opinion just leaks out in everything that I do. So trying to really hone that skill to be able to speak to something objectively was something that I needed, not only in academia, but also in my professional life. And so being able to reach out to the professors at any time and just say, hey, I need a little bit of help with this, that everyone was very accessible. And then particularly in the capstone, there is, correct me where I'm wrong, Frank, but there's a librarian and then also a writing professor that's attached to the capstone project. So those are both available to you as resources as well.
Yes, that is correct. And
Yeah.
it is remarkable to watch the progress of students from the foundational courses through the program up to the capstone. And really, just to answer the question dealing with writing a bit more, all of our courses require writing. So we have an opportunity to write in discussion questions and posting responses to that. And the instructor looks at those and offers commentary as to how to improve your writing. Also, you begin to see how peers are writing too. We can learn an awful lot from our peers and how they approach a topic and write about it, how their organization is made in a discussion question, and how they can improve their clarity. So writing becomes a big part of the entire program. And we focus on that because that's a very important part of communication.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anne, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to something that Frank mentioned is I've been working from home since 2007. So this is not unusual for me. It was when COVID happened for everyone, it was a big shock, but learning online was just an extension of what I was already doing by working online, and that's through multiple jobs. It was not just limited to one organization. So working remotely and learning remotely is all, it's all really accessible, particularly as you get to know your computer. You will become friends with your laptop throughout this program for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. I will also echo that Seattle University School of Law has for the last several years, but about the last decade, has had a legal writing program that's within the top 10 for many, many years. We take writing very, very seriously here. When I say that, I'm chuckling because we really do, but it's a little bit humorous because it's, you know, it's humorous to take commas quite so seriously. And I'm also a graduate of Seattle University School of Law and the main campus. And so it is hard. I mean, legal writing was very difficult for me, like Anne was mentioning it was for her. And it's challenging. It's really difficult to kind of unlearn adjectives and to relearn commas. But there's so much support, and the professors are very accessible. I wish I teach in the program a little bit less than I used to, but I wish that my students would reach out more, honestly, and engage a little bit more than they do sometimes. So we are very, very accessible when students do reach out.
And when you talk about those commas, those are very important when you, particularly when you're talking about a policy proposal, when you start to really read into policies that have been proposed, or policies that are going, you know, bills that are becoming law, and you start to see things. It's not just commas, it's colons and semicolons, and all of these things really matter. Where you end a sentence, it's almost like poetry. It's really important to understand those fundamentals. So it's not surprising to me that my worst grade was in that initial course, but it did not scare me away. It just propelled me to want to be better and do better and to grow in the program, which I did. I actually, like Frank said, I came home with a fancy medal I got to wear around my chest. So it's very nice to receive that, but that's just working with the cohort of colleagues that I was able to work with, not just the professor, but the group work that you engage in and the teamwork that you have as you're going through the program. That all helps you with each stage of this.
Did you have something to add, Frank?
Students in my courses have my cell phone number.
That's true.
I very much am on a first name basis and cell phone basis with my students. Yeah.
I'll admit to texting Frank more than once.
Yeah. And we also, it's not something that we've done in the past, but we also are working on feedback we've gotten is to create a more casual discussion group for students to get that support offline, like outside of class. Hey, I'm working on this project, or I don't understand this, but outside of the discussion group of the course. So we're working on standing that up in the next couple of months. So Professor DiMarino, now I feel like I should just call you Frank here, but could you walk us through the capstone process and what that looks like? How do you even go about finishing this darn project here?
Yeah, so briefly, the selection process really is based upon the student's interest. And by that, what I mean is what would they like to learn about? What would they like to be able to contribute to their professional career? How can they make this project part of that portfolio that they would like to take to an interview, for instance, and show some of the academic work that they've accomplished? And also, how this project can really contribute to the field of compliance and risk management. So they formulate a proposal based upon their interests. And this proposal is something that is an iterative process, right? This is something that they may start with a grand proposal that might be looking like they're going to boil the ocean. And so we work with them to narrow down the proposal so that it's focused. And one of the things that our capstone courses really is different is that we ask them to work with an industry stakeholder. Now, this industry stakeholder is like a guide on the side. It's like a mentor that is a specialist in the area of the student's interest. And so we've got a list of volunteers. We ask the student also to begin to expand their own network to find a stakeholder. Now, the stakeholder isn't going to grade the paper. It's really a mentor to help the student guide them with focus on working on their project. And so that's part of the planning process. During the capstone course, we ask students to really treat it like a project, to treat it like and be a project manager over their own capstone outcome. And we also guide them through the research process. You mentioned that we have a librarian that is there throughout the entire course, and we show them how to use the library to be able to find resources, how to find the difference between primary resources and secondary authorities, and also how to use some of the tools in Lexis, Nexus, and Westlaw so that their research for this particular capstone project is really something that they can be proud of, that they have established a foundation for the project by writing, for instance, a literature review and making certain that their project is something that is innovative, founded on good authority, and also can contribute to the field. And so by that time, they are at the execution phase. Every project has a written component. It may be only 5 pages or so, but the execution of the project is by creating a podcast, creating a website. And so at this time, I think it's best that we turn it over to Kelly on the next slide about the website.
And you mean? I'm like, I could talk about this, but I don't think it would be very good.
Yeah. So the screen you're seeing here is my website called privacyhoarder.com. If you're watching from home, you can certainly pull that up. It's still available online. there are a couple of things that are on here, which include a blog, which are really just my thoughts. But along with this, that first splash page you come to, it really describes why I decided to do this project. From that first sentence that ends with terms of service did not read. There's a lot of links to things there, but what I found as I was going through the program is I started to lean into privacy law and the changes in privacy law, the differences between the United States and other countries, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, was very interesting to me. There was someone else in the cohort who had already received a number of certifications in that area, and it seemed a natural extension of what I was doing in cyber. However, the first cohort started in the fall of 2019. So what really drew me to this was the fact that all of our children were suddenly online, forced onto the computer, sometimes for the first time, including my own daughter, who had previously not used screens. And suddenly she's doing school online. And I really felt it was important to call out the different rights that parents had in looking out for their children's education online. There are some applications that would even store the geolocation data of your child, and I found that to be really remarkable. What I also found as I started doing more research and planning and working with my stakeholder, who I was really fangirling over my stakeholder. She is amazing that I even found her. I was very lucky. She has worked in privacy in 3 of the major cloud service providers in the world, and a PhD, and that I could even work with her. I was shocked. And I had conversations with her where I would just say, you know what, I really want to build this thing that anyone, no matter where they are, can access it. And I wanted to build like an application that parents could get their hands on and see what their kids, what data is being stored by their children. And I just had these really, really big ideas. And she kept saying, yeah, there are whole graduate departments that are doing that. This is one of those boil the ocean scenarios that Professor DiMarino was saying earlier. So she really helped guide me into saying you could create one thing, which this website ended up being, is one thing that contained research and would contain things that I would want my friends to know, that I would want my brothers and sisters to know about their children, that I would want people to be able to use if they were out in the world, and really start to see why privacy matters. And it was also an opportunity for me to really put some effort into writing my own privacy policy, saying why privacy is important, putting up those disclaimers. I'm not a lawyer, I just went to law school. Some of those things, it kind of put everything that I was learning in the entire program into practice. And it was a thing that, although it's on the internet and it's not really a thing, it's a thing that I can look back on and be proud of. And I got to make a cool logo. That's a koala. That's a lock, by the way, for children. But that's really how I came to the website, is I wanted to create something. And you'll notice right here on the page, Opt Out Easy actually is, there are tons of researchers at Carnegie Mellon University that are putting together these amazing things that there's no way that I could have done, but I wanted to do it. So instead, I made it a little bit more accessible for the people that I knew to be able to find it. And so that was my capstone. It took a while for me to get to where it was a place that I wanted to share it with people. And so I really felt like the one term you have is not enough. So I think if I could give anyone feedback, is if you're starting to think about your capstone now and early, that is good. If you're already in the midst of your capstone program and you haven't begun to think about it, don't worry, you'll get there. Just get to the point where you can get it done, but it is better to start a lot sooner. Start as early as you can, early and often. Think about that capstone.
Well, you'll be happy to know, Anne, that we started, our students now have kind of a pre-capstone like seminar. They have a few of them actually to get
Nice.
them. Yeah, they have a few sessions before the capstone course to kind of get them ramped up and getting their stakeholder and everybody lined up before. And then we've even this fall, I think, with the new cohort coming in, we are going to get them started mostly on the stakeholder and kind of priming them for what does it mean to identify a stakeholder and networking, so that because we recognize they've got 2 years of courses, and we've got some really great partnerships with Kaiser Permanente and Microsoft. So with some of their subject matter experts in these spaces, we've started some networking opportunities both with our alums and starting to bring in some of these subject matter experts so that they can start to network with these folks in industry, and really taking advantage of those opportunities to identify stakeholders earlier, so that when they get to the point of their capstone and needing to really cement a stakeholder, that they can, that they're not scrambling and trying to figure it all out at the last minute. So
that's really good. I was lucky to have a stakeholder that I identified early on through the program that I just said, I really want to get to know this person more. And like I said, fangirling over this, just the resume of looking up somebody on LinkedIn and going, oh my gosh. And so I don't want to out her because she might not be as proud of this website as I am. But it was really great working with her and working with my cohort too, because the stakeholder really just gives you guidance on the topics and where you're going, and don't boil the ocean, or here are some ideas. Maybe you could do this instead and it would help hone, they just kind of help guide you. But I also needed help with, even like for me, for a website, for presentation, for, having someone to proofread. So I used my cohort for that, because then it's a kind of it's a win-win, because then they want you to review their work. Which is hard. If you're asking someone to review your work, you have to be willing to also give. But I also learned by looking at their capstones when we were, because we were in completely different fields by that point, I was learning and also sharing at the same time. So it became a really awesome networking. It's an awesome responsibility, but it was also really an awesome thing to be a part of and be engaged with. And I still talk to some of the folks from my cohort today, even though I feel like it's been forever, but that's COVID ruining my sense of time. It's just been a year since wrapping up, but
yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing your process. Let's see. I don't know which one of you all wants to kind of talk about why the capstone is so valuable. It's something that really sets us apart in a program, right? There are, a handful of other programs similar to ours, and not many of them have a capstone project. And I personally, a capstone is not unique to Seattle U's approach to learning, right? So Seattle University, for those of you who are not familiar, is a Jesuit institution. And I will be very vulnerable here. When I was applying to law schools, was a little bit Anxious is the kind word about, writing a whole big check to a Catholic school. And it's just not where I am, like, public school educated up through grad school. And I just wasn't sure what that meant. And it says a lot that I got both my master's and my doctorate here. And I literally have not left campus since I graduated. I have been teaching on faculty since I graduated law school. And you could not, like, I won't leave this campus. I love this community. And more than anything, I am so committed to the Jesuit tradition of education. And that didn't mean anything to me until I experienced it. And so much of that is captured in what we do around Capstone. Just the immersive learning experience, the inquisitiveness, the real asking of questions. So setting the religious component aside, the Jesuit tradition has absolutely very little to do with the religious component. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the value from a learning perspective is around Capstone.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll say I didn't run into religion often in in the program. It didn't really come up
Outside of the
often.
chapel, a couple doors down, you don't experience it a lot
Yeah,
on
and
campus.
I was working remotely.
Yeah,
But
so, right.
yeah, but I actually chose Seattle U because I wanted a school that had a physical presence, and I wanted a school that had that was known for something other than just being not to diss an online school, but just an online school. I wanted something that had some meat and some grit to it.
And
And
for into sports, we have a rock star basketball team these days.
I keep seeing that on your, I think LinkedIn, you keep posting some things about sports law.
Our basketball team, if y'all are like, I'm a sports nerd, we did really, really well last season. We just recruited a really great recruit, he's a sophomore coming up from Southern California. So
I feel like if someone was going to do their capstone on sports law, they might have a person right here that they'd be.
I know I have to take a hard line around not being, that would be a hard stakeholder
right relationship. I know. But I will say that the impact, I think that Frank can probably speak to how those three other bubbles all come together in that Venn diagram. But the impact of it for me was that it changed my career from just thinking about quality and risk management in maybe just a deliverable or an operational sense, and really took it more into an overall understanding, more of an umbrella understanding. And then when I started looking at privacy, particularly around children's education, I started reading and realizing about the impacts of privacy law on our daily lives, or the lack thereof, those privacy laws. And so I actually attended the Global Privacy Summit this year, and I was able to meet a couple of attorney generals for states. I was able to hobnob with some general counsels and lawyers from other countries. And I would say about 50% of people in that were lawyers, and the other 50% were like me, where we're kind of in this legal space, but not really wanting to be a lawyer. But the impact here is that I am now able to speak both super nerd in my cyber world and with my legal team. So my legal team and my CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, are my best friends at work. I couldn't do what I do without having both of them. So I found myself in this middle space. And that's really where privacy is in between these two spaces of information security and also legal. And so it was through the capstone that I was able to kind of define that as where I wanted to go in the next step of my career. And I don't want to age myself, but I might have grown up listening to music in the 80s.
I'm right there with you.
So redefining my career at this stage in my life was really exciting. It was something that I could really just sink my teeth into. And it's through this capstone that I had that impact. So I know Frank has more to say about reflection and demonstration and how you integrate all of these things. But for me, the impact was the biggest thing. It changed the trajectory of what I do.
Thank you, Anne. This slide really is the summary of the entire capstone experience. And I think that the best exhibit of the value of the capstone is someone like Anne, who has completed the capstone course and now is able to apply all of that learning in her career to advance it. And so we thank Anne so much for being able to express some of the impact that the capstone course has had on her career. These three circles there in this Venn diagram really are meant to explain how we go about teaching or facilitating the capstone course. We ask students to first take a look at the program outcomes and also all of the outcomes in their courses that they have taken and how they can integrate that learning. We ask them also to reflect on that as to what they're interested in. Where are the gaps in their learning, or what interests them the most? Kelly spoke about the Jesuit pedagogy in teaching. And one of the things that we're encouraged to do as faculty members here at Seattle U is to remain curious and also to try to teach students curiosity, how they can question things, and also take time to reflect on their learning. And I think that's one of the biggest attributes here at Seattle University that I'm very proud of. And then lastly, to demonstrate their learning, to create a project that is of value to the field that they're interested in compliance or risk management, and to, as Anne mentioned, to work with a stakeholder, an industry specialist, someone who they may want to apply for a job to in the future, or at least become a colleague with in the future, and to ask for them for feedback and input as to whether or not their capstone project has value. So it's someone more than just a course facilitator or a research librarian or the director of the program, but someone outside who is an industry specialist who is looking in at their capstone project. I'm so glad also that Anne mentioned peer review. I think that's so valuable, is working with your colleagues in the program and asking them for their feedback about your work. I think that's one of the best ways to improve work for anybody, your work product. Many times, even as a faculty member, I'm going to my colleagues and asking them, what do you think of this assignment? What do you think of how this course is designed? Do you think that students are getting what they need out of it to advance their careers? So I'll turn it back over to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Sure. I have to note that I totally made a grammar faux pas after completely touting the legal writing program. I moved the apostrophe in students on this slide. It was outside of the S for a plural, and the careers is plural. And then I moved the students in, the apostrophe inside the S, and I intended to make career singular, but I forgot to take off the S. So we all make mistakes. But
did you have someone peer review that after
I did not.
You did
Actually,
it? See?
I think I did send you all these slides, but
See, that's the importance of peer review right there. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I didn't give you much time. Yeah. So I do want to let, I know that there were some questions, or rather, I do want to allow for some time for some questions about the capstone. I've got some other slides about the MLS generally, and there was a question about the MLS admissions process, which I'm happy to answer kind of as I review some of the program highlights. But does anyone have any questions about the capstone specifically? And if you raise your hand, I can unmute you. I just want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions about the capstone. There's this like unspoken, I totally just violated it, but there's this unspoken thing in teaching where like you wait 7 seconds. And it's miserable when you're teaching in a lecture. It's very silent. It's really hard when you're on Zoom. But Anne and Frank, I do want to give you all permission. I know that it's they're all Zooming in, they are not on Pacific time, and I do want to give you all permission to get on with your day and your evening if you need to. So, but you're welcome to hang out. I just have a few slides to kind of go over some of the program details and whatnot for folks if they're interested, and give people an opportunity to ask questions about admissions and all of that stuff. And you're welcome to hang out if you like. So I will leave that up to you all.
Thank you, Professor
course.
DiMarino. It's nice to see you. And thank you, Professor Rodriguez-Curry. It's nice to see your faces again. And this has been wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Anne.
And thank you, Kelly. I'll
course.
sign off too. If
course,
there are
thank
any
you.
questions, just reach out to me.
Of course, we will. Thank you. I will go ahead and continue. So please keep the questions coming. I know that it's disjointed. They are both several hours ahead of us. So I do want to kind of highlight, I get lots of questions around what is an MLS, and certainly it's a Master of Legal Studies, but what even is a Master of Legal Studies? And the way I view an MLS is that it is it's definitely a law degree, right? You don't exit law school practicing law necessarily like you would with a JD, but it's a degree that allows you to view business through the lens of law. So you will exit being able to view business problems and organizational problems with a legal lens, and look for solutions with the lens of legal regulations, law, with the same skill set that many lawyers do. And as Anne was saying before, you have the same nomenclature and the same language to speak to general counsel. It's definitely a language barrier often that keeps business people from speaking the same language as lawyers. Often when, I'm a trained lawyer, and so when you enter a room, like everybody's like, oh my gosh, the lawyer, right? Lawyers are known for saying no, and we speak this other language. And it's not that we are trained to just say no, it's that people just don't understand the language that we speak. And so sometimes bridging that gap is really the issue. And sometimes lawyers don't have the business acumen, or they went to law school really early and they haven't been in business long enough. And so they don't know some of the business language that you all do, right? They haven't worked in industry long enough. And many business folks don't necessarily have the legal language or the legal knowledge, right? So an MLS can often bring business folks and give them the legal language, and it bridges that gap in a way that is unbelievably powerful. So that's how I view an MLS, and an MLS in compliance is very similar. So when we talk about an MLS in compliance, the idea is really just giving you that same sort of language in a regulatory capacity. What does it mean when we talk about a regulatory capacity? Well, every industry, every organization is subject to regulatory authority. Every industry has regulations from federal government, state government, local authority, whether that's the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Communications Administration, the city ordinances, anything. And any organization is going to face increasing risks, right? We live in a world where there's only going to be increased regulations. And I put up this particular picture because it sounds a little bit ridiculous. Of course, skydiving is risky, but even skydiving has, even it might not be regulated the way that healthcare or finances, but there are a million risks and compliance issues here, right? How was the parachute packed? How was the plane flown, right? The FAA governs the plane. There may or may not be regulations around how the parachute is packed. There may or may not be regulations around where they're jumping. There may or may not be regulations around the weather. There may or may not be regulations around what sort of fabric the flight suits are made out of, or the jump suits. There may or may not be regulations around the helmets that are being worn. My point here is that even the regulations, or excuse me, even the industries and organizations that are clearly outside of what you might think of as the heavily regulated industries have no shortage of regulatory agencies and authorities that impact their day-to-day operations. So any leader in that organization and in that industry has to know where to look for those risks, what to look for. I can tell you right now, if you've ever been skydiving, and this is not something you'll find in a regulation, not something you'll even know to look for unless you are an attorney or speak the language, like an MLS degree would give you. State law, state tort law, will have you sign a waiver. Right? A waiver is not something you're going to find in a book. It's not regulated. It's not a statute. It's just case law. And Washington state law, I live in Seattle, so Washington state law applies, has 6 factors in a particular waiver. And unless you knew how to read cases and do research on what cases apply and which cases take precedent in an area like skydiving, which is sport, you wouldn't know how to write or craft a particular waiver to waive liability in that sort of industry. That's compliance, right? So any leader is a compliance officer, right? We have fancy words like compliance officer or contracts manager, but the reality is that any leader in any organization is a compliance officer. Compliance and risk management are really just fancy names for procedures and policies. So leaders have to know where to look, what to look for, and then how to assess the importance or severity. How do you triage that risk? How do you plan for it? And how do you handle it if it happens? That's what an MLS in compliance and risk management is going to train you for. And you can get a MLS in compliance and risk management any number of places we talked about before, right? There's several other organizations that offer them. I absolutely believe that Seattle University School of Law is far and away differentiated by a number of reasons, or in a number of ways. Man, it's getting late. And one of the ways is because we're fully online, we can pull from practitioners all over the country. Our compliance in healthcare has practitioners that practitioners that hold literally the global compliance officer in leading global healthcare practices. We have the woman who runs a state agency in the state of Washington teaching one of our courses. We are able to pull from compliance officers who lead Fortune 500 companies, and they build our courses from the ground up. The Jesuit tradition that we talked about earlier and the mission of Seattle University also then really works to bring the ethical component. There's the part that will teach you the compliance, and it's one thing to really adhere to rules. It's another thing to adhere to rules in an ethical way. And doing both is sometimes hard. You have to choose. So we really push our students to make those tough decisions. We've talked a couple of times, so I won't berate it too much, but that foundational core is absolutely key to our program. A lot of the other programs require one course, and then you take a bunch of electives, which is great, right? You have a lot of variety. You can take a lot of courses around a lot of very niche classes. The downside is that you will learn a lot about how the law is today. And you might learn about how healthcare law is today, or how finance law is today, or about how a certain law behaves in this moment in 2022 or 2023. The downside is that the law changes every single, 4 years or 2 years, or whenever Congress decides to renew it, or whenever the state agency decides, not state agency, but whenever the administrative agency chooses to make a rule change. And unless you know how to find the rule change, respond to the rule change, read the rule change, and interpret the rule change, you're not going to know how the law impacts your organization in 10 years or 20 years. And our foundational core courses are the first couple of terms, and that's where you learn to find primary and secondary sources and read the law and interpret the law and really synthesize the law. We spend a lot of time really teaching you where to find the law and how to read it and synthesize it. And then finally, really leading and taking those skills into your career 10 and 20 years down the line. Taking that synthesis and those communication skills into the capstone so that you've got the skills to take into your professional career, so that that MLS is going to serve you in 10 years when the law has changed, and the healthcare course that you took this year, that HIPAA compliance is not going to look the same, and you need to reinterpret it and build a new policy. That's what those foundational courses will do for you. Program details. I trust that most of you have probably been on the website. Our program is absolutely fully online. We have built it so that there are some live courses that you can participate in if you choose to. Many of our students, they cannot make the live courses. There are accommodations for you to, the live courses are recorded and you can view them in a time that works for you. The classes are part-time, so you take 5 credits a semester. It is 24 months, 2 years, and it's a total of 30 credits. So you're done in 2 years. We have a fall start and a spring start, so September or January. There was a question earlier about admissions, what the admissions rate was on the program. And the admissions rate is a really difficult question to answer specifically. And the reason for that is, honestly, I don't have a lot of historical data on that because we just have not had a solid CRM, like a solid data collection process on that. So I am relatively new to this particular program. I have been on campus with Seattle U for 10 years, and I've run another program in this particular, or in a different school prior to this. I do not have a lot of historical data on this program. I can tell you, however, that the applications process looks at the whole person, right? So GPA, many of our students have not been in school for several years, and their GPA may not be what they wish it were. I was a non-traditional student. I came back to law school in my early 30s, and my GPA was not what I wish that it were. But we definitely take into consideration so many other factors, right? Your career history, what you've done with your career. We really, really consider whether or not compliance is where you really want to be, and I don't mean compliance officer. I mean, do you see compliance as a part of business leadership? Do you view compliance as, and when I say compliance, I mean policies, procedures, program building. Do you see that as a part of business leadership? And how do you plan to use this degree in your business leadership? That's what the admissions committee is most concerned with. And certainly, do you have the commitment to the program? Do you have the commitment to yourself? And do you want to be here? We have the students that are unsuccessful in this program are those who are doing it because they think that they should, and then are just not super committed. And more than anything, we want for our admitted students to be successful. So I hope that answered your question. If you have other more specific questions, I'm happy. Please reach out to me online, and I'll put up my contact information again after this slide. There was one other question. How do an MLS and a JD, so a general counsel, it's worth noting that a JD doesn't necessarily have to be a general counsel, interact in a business. I referenced a waiver or a writing policy. Would the MLS write, then general counsel be the ultimate approver? Not necessarily, actually. So a JD is an attorney or somebody who is trained with a law degree. A JD or someone who has graduated with a JD is not necessarily licensed to practice law. So someone who graduates with a JD can decide to not sit for the bar exam. And if they do not sit for the bar exam, or if they do not pass or choose to, or maybe they do pass, but then later decide to not renew their bar exam license or renew their law license, they could not be licensed to practice law. And a waiver, if someone were for their business, skydiving, personal training, whatever, right? Those are the same types of waiver. They would want the same sort of waiver. They're liability waivers in the sort of sport-ish realm, sport recreation-ish realm, skiing, that sort of stuff. If an MLS student or somebody with an MLS degree had the research ability to write the whole waiver and graduating from this program, they would have the ability to research if they applied themselves, right? Like there are definitely students who could get through and focus somewhere else. And they'd probably have to like you graduate from a program, you like kind of have to like go back and relearn a new space, right? But like, yeah, you could go back and like, when you're researching cases, sometimes you got to like dust off the mothballs a little bit. Researching cases is a skill that it's like, when I have to reinterpret statistics again, I have to like go and like dust some things off there. Sometimes you got to do that with case law. I happen to know waivers really well, so that's why I picked that. But an MLS student, if they were like on it and were able to go in and had the tools to research cases, they could absolutely put together they could put together a good waiver. They could write a good waiver and they could get you about 95% there. The challenge is that they could not defend that waiver in court, right? Because they're not a licensed attorney. So from a general counsel perspective, and even a general counsel, they could probably write the waiver. Most GCs are very much generalists, right? They know lots of areas of law a little bit, but not diving deep, right? Most companies, most organizations still have outside counsel for a specific area, right? So you might have outside employment counsel, outside personal injury counsel, outside corporate counsel, outside, right? They have different areas. Even if a general counsel wrote that waiver, they'd probably have it looked at by someone outside just to get it signed off. Because when it comes to defending that waiver, if someone were to sue them, they're still going to have to get an attorney to defend that waiver in court. And even an inside general counsel, not usually a litigator. So they're still going to have to outsource the defense of that waiver. And if a litigator or whoever is deciding to litigate or defend that waiver is probably going to want to be the one who signed off on it, or at least someone who, I mean, even if, you know, it's 20 years later and the person who signed off on it is no longer around, like you're probably going to want to make sure that somebody signed off on that pretty well. So what that does do, however, is that you only paid your employee their regular salary to build the waiver, and you haven't paid an outside counsel $1,000 an hour to write it. So there's that. I'm not sure if that answers your question. That was a very long answer. I think it's really about, you know, when you're talking about compliance, compliance is about policies and procedures. So yes, the waiver is a part of that. Compliance is also about making sure that you are not just checking boxes, but that you are making sure that you're hiring the right people and all of the paperwork is filled out and that the waivers are getting signed, right? It's great to have a waiver that has all of the right things on it, but if the waiver isn't getting signed, it doesn't do you any good. If your employees aren't being trained well and they are not getting the waiver signed or not packing the parachutes well or not doing all of these other things, then there's issues. So I think that when we think about compliance and risk management, it's not just about the details, it's about the overarching business operations and having someone that can see the forest and talk to the people that work on the trees, if that helps. Let's see. The next question was, is it possible to keep a full-time job? Yes, absolutely. And we will in June, I don't have a date yet. In June, we will be having a webinar with one of our current students who will be talking about kind of a day in the life, but we have many, many students who work full-time and do the program. It is considered part-time program for 2 years, and we have many students who work full-time during the program, for sure. I hope that answers your question. Happy to entertain other questions, and I'm certainly happy to like unmute you all if you want to ask questions like in real life. I will, sorry, I should have put up my contact information before. Happy to answer other questions if you have some. Otherwise, feel free to reach out, send me an email, or you're welcome to give me a phone call. Next month, we will be having a webinar on the applications process. So on May 23rd, I believe, I think it's at noon, and we'll be posting it on the website tomorrow, but all of the questions about the applications process, kind of how to fill it out, what we're looking for in the personal statement, how to answer the scholarship question. So feel free to tune in, or if you'd like to fill out the application beforehand, please let me know, reach out if you have any other questions, and look forward to hearing from you all. Thanks so much for calling in tonight. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to send me an email. Hope you all have a good night. Oh, yeah. Thank you.